Hello, Patriots. It's I, the questioning Patriot, back again for another video. And I gotta tell you, I got a doozy for you today. So strap yourself in because I believe that the deep state is at work right now to keep our eyes off the Jeffrey Epstein ball. And I'm gonna unravel this whole thing for you. So, what really kind of brought this to my attention, because I go through the news all the time, as you know, doing the Parler account, is the murder of the judge. Obviously, this was huge news. Everybody was talking about this, right? The judge Esther Salas, who someone who dressed like a FedEx employee, came to her door, knocked on her door, murdered her 20-year-old son, and shot her husband, and then ran off. So that was the big story. It was a big story. It was all very confusing. And then it came out that, oh, okay, so she is about to do the Dutch bank case against Jeffrey Epstein. Now, for most people, when you hear that, you're like, okay, what does that even mean? Did the bank owe Jeffrey Epstein money? Did Jeffrey Epstein owe the bank money? What's so important about that? So most people would then at that point kind of research that, but they said no. No, they did not do that because instead we got someone to hate. We got Mr. Roy Den Hollander. So this was the gentleman that is presumed to have came to the house and shot the son and shot the husband. Okay, and we have ourselves a nice, tidy little bow. This guy is an anti-feminist. He has done a lot of things. He's fought against illegal immigration. He's fought against ladies' nights because, he's had the common sense to say, hey, you know what? If we threw a men's night and men were allowed and free and women were not, there would be rioting on the streets. He's just pointing out the obvious. That's the kind of person that we're talking about right here. The kind of person who's fighting for true equality, everyone actually being treated equal, not being treated differently based on years and years and years of being treated like trash by, yes, white men, but not anyone we knew because this was a long time ago. Okay, he's that guy. He's been working as a lawyer for a very long time. And this is what I want to set up who this gentleman was. He was a lawyer. He worked on a lot of high-profile cases. He had a lot of connections. He knew a lot of lowlifes, as most lawyers will do. He worked for the Russians. He said he worked for Kroll Associates in Moscow, Russia between 1990 and 2000, managed and promoted Kroll's intelligence and security delivery in the former Soviet Union. And the more you hear about this gentleman, the more you're like, wait, that doesn't sound like the kind of guy who's just going to snap and start murdering people. But he didn't even snap, because it was very clearly premeditated when you come in with the FedEx uniform. You put the time and effort into getting that FedEx uniform. But this is where the story gets even more interesting, because if you want to distract the entire world from the Jeffrey Epstein ball, which is a humongous ball, you got to make it a juicy detail. So now we find out that Roy Den Hollander actually is probably the person who committed another murder of this gentleman right here, a California lawyer named Angelucci. That's not his first name, but his last name. And he was also an anti-feminist lawyer who was murdered earlier this month. Now, all this sounds very interesting. It sounds very convincing. And you say, okay, maybe this guy snapped. Maybe. But this is where I'm going to start taking you down the rabbit's hole potentially, which is that on July 2nd, Ghislaine Maxwell was arrested. We all knew about it. It was all a huge deal. She's Jeffrey Epstein's pimp or whatever. It's a big stinking deal, right? Well, I want you to pay attention to the date. July 2nd, 2020. So what I am saying could have potentially happened, because who the heck knows what's real and what's not at this point, is that all these billionaires in the deep state said, oh my God, Giselle's caught, we are so dead. And then there were a couple who said, no, we're billionaires. We have enough money. We could buy all of North America. Canada, Mexico, hell, we'll go buy Greenland. We could do that if we pooled together our money. We can make anything happen right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the best and the brightest minds that we have working on how we get ourselves out of this situation so that we can still be billionaires and we can still do whatever the hell we want to whomever the hell we want. How do we do that? Well, we're going to need to make a really juicy case. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get some high-profile people murdered. And then in comes potentially someone to kill this gentleman right here, who at the time, it just seemed like a nothing murder. It was just someone was murdered because I believe this was July 11th. So it took them 9 days to concoct their plan. Okay? and stay with me. I know I'm going all over the place. And then 9 days later, we have Judge Esther Salas. Her husband shot, son murdered. Okay. This is another big, high-profile thing. It also comes out that, yes, obviously she's about to do that bank case. Now, let's actually go to that bank case, because I want you to really understand what that bank case is. Now, the big thing, I'm not going to bury the lead here, but right there, 18 transfers to at least 3 unnamed co-conspirators. So what Jeffrey Epstein was doing was he was paying huge sums of money to the people who he was, running this island with, the people who were going to this island, correct? And the way that he was getting all this money to them, obviously wasn't going to be able to do it through cash, was through this Dutch bank. So what we are trying to do is sue the bank so we can get the names of the confidants and say, hey, you were being incredibly negligent. You let him do this, and if you don't want us to sink your entire freaking bank, we want the names of who Jeffrey Epstein was sending to, because if that happens, the house of cards is gone, baby. Somebody took a giant industrial-sized fan to that house of cards. It's going down, and we're talking about hundreds of billionaires and millionaires squealing on each other like little rats because they don't want to go to prison. You want to talk about somebody who's going to be a fast talker? It's going to be them. As soon as they start getting grilled, they are going to be squealing because they're going to be like, here, I'll give you 10 other billionaires if you let me sit on house arrest for the rest of my life, or let me escape, or let me do whatever, if they get caught. I mean, right now, they're at full panic mode, and we need to remember this. And there's one thing that I want to remind you before we go on. If you ever have doubt in this whole giant conspiracy theory, think about the Jeffrey Epstein case. Think about Jeffrey Epstein. Everybody and their mother knows the Jeffrey Epstein meme. Remember Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself? That one? We joke about it. But really think about it for a second. We all knew that people were going to try and kill Jeffrey Epstein. He was placed in a maximum security prison. The entire world was watching Jeffrey Epstein. And these billionaires with balls the size of Rhode Island still had him killed. We knew that was going to happen. And it happened. That's the size, that's the power of the people we're dealing with right here. Okay, don't ever forget that. So when I'm about to tell you that I think that Roy Den Hollander was completely framed, I don't think it's that outrageous. So they're trying to tell us now that Roy Den Hollander flew to California. He shot this anti-feminist lawyer who presumably they're on the same page. They are two walls in an oncoming tsunami. You think they might be friends, correct? It's not like this was a feminist lawyer. This was an anti-feminist lawyer. They were two sheeps in the herd, so to speak. They were on the same page, which doesn't make any dang sense to me, but you want a juicy story, you want a juicy story. Okay, so here's what I'm saying, because it gets even weirder. This Roy Den Hollander, if you didn't hear, he committed suicide in his house or in a cabin. It was one of his properties he owned, because let's also establish here, let's also realize this is a guy who worked for Russia. This is a lawyer for the last 20 years on very high-profile cases. This is a very wealthy, intelligent man who would have the means and the resources to do just about whatever the hell he wanted. This was not your typical thug on the street who couldn't live with the guilt of murdering someone and then blew his brains out. This is not him. Okay? And I don't buy that it's him. And when you really start to think about that, I think that's when the whole conspiracy kind of unravels a little bit, because this is the patsy that they choose. And this is a guy who's not a patsy. Now, the other thing that's really interesting, and hopefully I have it still pulled up here, is they don't have any confirmed reports about how they found this guy's dead body in his house. Okay, here it is. Hollander's body was discovered in a car by a municipal employee in the town of Rockland, New York. He died of an apparently self-inflicted gunshot wound. But what it also goes on to say is they have no idea how they knew where to go to get him. If it was completely unrelated, it just seems really fishy all to me. And especially, here's the other thing. This is a guy who he's already murdered someone. Okay? He murdered someone. He flew across the country to murder someone. Let's do that. He flew across the country to murder someone. He came back. He murdered someone else. He shot someone else. And he had to know that that was potentially something that could happen, that she would not open the door. I imagine that if he had the FedEx uniform all prepared out, he knew exactly where her house was. He had put a lot of forethought into this. Okay? And you're telling me he does it successfully. He gets home because he drove all the way home, and then he kills himself in his car. Even if he thought that he was going to be captured, I feel like this is the kind of man who's worked with enough lowlifes and scumbags, obviously, and has enough money that he's probably got himself an escape plan already. Maybe it's a small plane he could fly somewhere. Maybe it's a passport ready to go and somebody, one of his old connections who can fly him out of the country. I just don't believe that this is the guy who's overcome with guilt or overcome with whatever and just offs himself in his parking area. It just doesn't make sense to me. And I think if you really think about it, and the more you look into it, it's not going to make sense to you. So let me know what you think about it. I know this is obviously a very hot button topic. Do you think I'm just kind of grasping at nothing here, or do you think it sounds completely plausible? Because here's the thing. I think that the deep state is trying to take our eyes off the Jeffrey Epstein ball, and also by not murdering her, but in fact murdering her family, saying, hey, we can do whatever we want to you. So you remember that. They said that, and they also, oh man. Deep state stuff is very, very scary. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I hope I didn't ramble too much, but 8 tabs is a lot to keep track of. And thanks for watching the video.